Welcome to Living the Reclaim Life podcast. I'm Denisha. We're glad you're here for conversations that revive hope, inspire healing, and encourage you to live a vibrant life with Christ. So grab a cup of coffee as we chat with today's guest. This month in July, we are talking about how to love a cactus. And you might be thinking, what? You don't love a cactus. You definitely don't hug a cactus. But this theme this month has been inspired by so many conversations with women. Let's talk about this month. Let's talk about how to hug a cactus and how to love the prickly people in our lives. And so for today's episode, I have invited Dr. Mike Hattabaugh to join us. He is a friend from our church. He is also a pastoral counselor who specializes in helping his clients improve their relationships and communication. How many of us need that? But so that they can live joyful and purpose-filled lives. Dr. Hattabaugh has been counseling for over 30 years as a youth pastor, a senior pastor, and a college professor of communication studies. He comes to us with his BA in communication, his M.Div, and also a doctorate of ministry. And his expertise is marriage and relationships. So, boy, Mike, you are the perfect person to have on the podcast to kind of take forward this theme of dealing with difficult people.
Well, and I wondered, maybe I'm the best example of that, right? And here's a prickly person we can talk to about.
That was not why I invited you.
By the way, that's my first thing to say, right? Is guess what? Some days I wake up prickly.
Yeah.
And we all are, right? So I always like to start this conversation with the fact that sometimes it's just me. I'm having a bad day and I'm the one that wakes up prickly. And then I'm also hard to deal with sometimes. And I have an old friend from my theater background that's online that I crack up because he's always talking about people not warming up to him. And then he will post some outrageously negative, I hate all of you post. I'm like going, well, you're mad at prickly people and you're one of them, right? So yeah, I have to think we have to start with that, but I know exactly what you're talking about. And especially when you're dealing with people that have dealt with trauma and life's been hard or difficult, the reality is, guess what? Controlling, prickly, negative people go looking for victims that tolerate a lot, right? And so often that's the first thing we have to recognize is, hey, what about me? Sometimes it's a good thing. It's a good thing that you're vulnerable. But guess what? People can sniff that out and realize that sometimes you just have to recognize, wow, I'm really bad at choosing relationships. I just had this conversation yesterday with a client who recently had separated. And I'm like, well, I said, there's one of two things that are true. Either you've got some qualities about you that aren't very easy to live with, I said, or you're really bad at choosing a partner. And what's funny is he had not thought about that second statement. And it was like, if I just fix you and I don't make you better at actually going, what am I looking for? And what kind of qualities do I need in a person that will make a successful relationship? My focus tends to be on marriage and relationships, but we're talking, who we work with, who we live with, our family, those are all relationships. And so the basic skills for those don't change. So sometimes the answer to why am I always around prickly people is because either you're attracted to them or they're attracted to you.
That's such a good point.
So what happens is who do you have in your life that you can rely on to give you good information on a person that you, again, are attracted to or getting into a relationship with? Are you naturally attracted to, so one of the tendencies of some people, and I'm sure you've heard this a lot with your clients, is sometimes people are rescuers.
Yes.
Oh, I think I can rescue this person with all their flaws. Well, and then they're surprised when they're prickly or they can't be rescued.
Yeah. Wait, and isn't that true? When you are a rescuer, you really do attract people who need rescuing. I mean, without a billboard right on the top of our car.
You think about as you drive down, a lot of homeless signs really take advantage of this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is realize that, homeless people, and again, not all of them, right? But a lot of those signs are aimed at your emotions, not at theirs.
Yes.
And it works. And guess what? That's a good thing. That's, the quality in of us that's altruistic and wants to help people is really good. But so let me start with a little piece of information that I'll help clients work through. And so those of you listening to this podcast can do this is get a sheet of paper or a spreadsheet And I want you to list all the people in your life that you have relationships with. All right. So we're going to create 3 columns, and we're going to put all of the people that we deal with on a regular basis into one of 3 columns. And here are the 3 columns. Column number 1 is, these are people that only take from me.
Mm.
So the vast majority of time I'm giving to them, and very little do they give back to me. So that's column 1. Column 2 are people that I give and take with. And now here's the magic number is, if it's 70-30, I give them 70% and they give me 30%, or I give them 30% and they give me 70%. Anywhere between those ranges, 70 to 30. So if it's 60-40, 50-50, they go in this column. Most of the time, I feel like they're giving me almost as much as I'm giving them, or vice versa.
Okay.
So that's the people that fit in that column. So you start with that, they're easier to define, right? If I know 70-30. So like there are times my kids, I give them 70, they give me 30. But other times they give me a lot of joy and I don't give them as much back, right? So I put them in my column like that. I put my spouse in that column. Sometimes it's, 60-40 me, and sometimes it's 70-30 her. But that's somebody that I go, okay, there's equal weight here most of the time.
That's good.
There are seasons where we aren't, but most of the time I feel that way about them. And then the last column is people in your life that give you more than 70% than you give back. So think of people in your life that have been a mentor, people that love you no matter what, people that are willing to sacrifice things for you that you haven't given back in return. I was a springboard diver in college, and my coach who coached me just retired in April after 39 years. And passed away at 66 a month ago. And man, as I thought back on my time, I was like, wow, here's a person who gave way more to me than I gave to them. And I look back and go, man, I wish I had thanked him more for that, season that I went through in my life with him. Kind of a cool story how I became a springboard diver in college and got a conference championship. It was kind of a weird thing, but he was the coach and neat believer. But anyway, he would be somebody I'd put in that column, right? So after you write all these people in your column, so who just takes from me and doesn't give? Who is it 50-50, 60-40, maybe even 70-30? And then who gives to me and I never give back to them? Right. My guess is most people who feel like, why am I always surrounded by prickly people and struggle with that? Their first column is going to be heavily weighted.
I can see that. Yes.
And that's not balance. And we were designed by God to have a balance of people in our life. I think the biggest group of people should be in that middle column, but we should always have some people that we give more to than we take, right? So we should have that, or we're not serving anybody.
Yeah.
But we should also have mentors in our life, people that are giving to us more than we should be grateful for that, people that give and don't ask for much in return. Just think of the balance that creates when you have one of each. That already creates some good balance, right? But a lot of times people get into these, especially, when you have families, right? You get into these seasons where, man, you give up a lot.
Yeah.
And if you're not filling your tank somehow, then you're going to run dry pretty quick.
Yeah.
And oftentimes those cactus hurt a lot more when that's all you're running into.
Right. That is true. Good point.
It's like you're out in the desert hiking and man, I just stepped on one cactus. Now I'm going to imagine going in the middle of the desert here in Tucson and somebody takes your shoes and go, okay, you got to walk 5 miles home.
Oh, no, thank you. No,
you get
thank
tired
you.
of that. Yeah. How am I going to do that with all these cactus? And then a few rattlesnakes show up too, which
yes.
would also hurt. So that's exactly what I'm talking about, is we tend to get out of balance with that. And once we realize, and again, I help, people do this, codependent people, which is about half of us, are codependent in our natural state, right? By the way, I am one of those. On the codependent curve, I'm just on the codependent side. I'm not on the controlling side. But guess what? Codependent people, by our nature, we serve people that have their interests in mind, not ours. And that's what cactus are, is they're protecting themselves. Therefore, why did you think you could hug one and get some nourishment from one when they're out for their own self-interest? So just something to recognize about our own self. I think that's most of this work is often, what is it about me that makes me attracted to cactus people?
That's such a great point. And we don't always look at our own behaviors. I know we can tend to look at our intentions, but we look at other people's actions. So if they poke us, we think, wait. But what you're saying is for us to even look at why we're attracting those people, the balance of the people that we have in our lives, and kind of what place that is serving or filling us to have those different relationships.
Mm-hmm. You know, when I do marriage counseling, which I do a lot of, one of the first things we'll sit down in a session and do is say, all right, you can tell me your story. And almost always it kind of goes like this. It's like, well, if you'll just fix them, everything will be great.
But isn't it true? It's really more about if we fix us,
bingo.
Everything works better.
That's what I tell them. I'm like, look, I can't fix them. They can decide to be fixed, and I'll give them some great resources to help them do that. But guess what? I'm here for you to recognize, what do you own? And if you own 100% of you, then guess what? If you get better and they don't, it's going to make this a lot easier anyway. You're going to recognize, wow, this is a dysfunctional person in my life. And why did it take me so long to realize that the problem isn't I keep waiting for them to change. The problem is, why have I accepted this behavior for so long?
Is there a fourth category that we need to say, the people in this category need to move out of our lives, and that's okay?
Yeah. Love them from a distance, just like a cactus, right? Quit trying to hug the cactus.
That's a good point. Some of us need to hear that out there. Quit trying to hug the cactus. Love them from a distance. I love that.
So we call that boundaries, right? We're setting healthy boundaries. I can love you as long as you abide by the way I can live. And at some point I go, hey, I love you and would love to spend time with you, but as long as this behavior is going on. Here's a good example of this, prickly people, right? So I have this couple that comes to me several years ago. And they were an older couple and had been married for quite a while. She had always had a longstanding problem with his drinking. And I'm like, give me an example. And she's like, well, we'll agree before we go out to dinner that he's not going to drink. And I'm like, yeah. Then we go out to dinner, we go out with friends. And as soon as we sit down, he orders 2 margaritas. And so now you're thinking about divorcing him for that. Is that, yeah, it's only bad when he drinks. And I'm like, so think about this for a minute, right? Is you're going to throw away the whole relationship for this one thing that's just now bothered you to no end. And I'm like, so what have you ever done about it? Well, he keeps promising me he won't do it again. And I'm like, but what have you done about it? She's like, well, nothing. I'm like, exactly. So what's keeping you from saying, I won't go out with you anymore? And if we go out after you promising me to not do this, that the moment you order those margaritas, I'm telling our friends, excuse me, I have to leave. And you're driving the car home.
Yes.
And now he's got to call Uber or whatever to come home, right? And then it's on him. And you're just saying, what you're saying is, I'm not going to tolerate this behavior anymore. I can't live this way anymore. And that is so powerful when you own that. And then all of a sudden, all those, I work with narcissists sometimes, and boy, is that interesting. And some of these prickly people are narcissists, and they will make you feel guilty for their issues. That's what narcissists are great at. And literally, it's your fault that I messed up. That's the important part of this, is saying, wait a minute, I have power to control myself in these scenarios. It's easy to lose sight of that. A lot of this is echoes of our childhood, right? Is when we were children, we didn't have the power. We were too small and not intellectually strong enough to counteract our parents' healthy and unhealthy behaviors. But once we become adults, we have the power to say, no, I don't have to live this way. And so I'm not going to. And that doesn't mean we're going to immediately say, because this little thing, I'm rupturing our relationship. Instead, it's, look, I don't know what you're thinking, but I can't do that with you. And it may be something you can go do yourself, but I'm no longer going to enable that with my agreement with it or participation in it.
Would you say it's true also that when we are in those different relationships, we tend to tell the other people what they should do? For instance, in the example you gave, well, I don't want you to drink. But I love when you flip that. That's very empowering for the person who's dealing with that person, for the spouse to say, no, here's what I'm going to do. That is very empowering. How do you make that change from here's what you should do to here's what I'm going to do? That's almost a mental switch I feel like we have to flip.
Well, and so here's what's interesting about that. So I use absurdity to bring this to light. So, Denisha, you're at work today, you're in your office, and I know your husband. So, if you went home from work today and your husband had set up a meth lab, you walk in the door and he's got the beakers out and the smell's going and meth is cooking on the stove, what would you do?
I don't know. I think I'd look for
You've
the
never thought
camera.
about that, right?
Right?
That is
No. I feel like,
that
are we
has
doing
never
Breaking
entered,
Bad? What's happening in here?
yeah, that has never entered your mind, has it? You
No.
and James have never had that conversation over dinner. If you ever crank up a meth lab in our house, this is what I'm going to do.
Right. Not even on my radar. I don't even have a space for it.
Right. And yet, guess what? Almost everybody tells me. So when I've got a couple sitting in there and they're struggling with, why won't he do this or why won't she do that? I'll say, well, what if you came home tonight, they had a meth lab? And if they have young children, like, oh, I grab my kids and I'm out of there. I'm like, there's no way I'm staying in that.
Yeah.
Right. Here's what you're not going to do, right? You're not going to walk in and go, oh, okay, well, I hope you make us a lot of money. I'll be back in the bedroom.
I guess we're doing this now.
Yeah. You're not going to do that, are you?
No.
You're going to immediately say, I can't live that way.
Right.
So absurdity proves this point, right? Is there are thousands of things in my marriage that I've never talked to my wife about. But yet, if they appeared out of the blue, I would definitely say, I can't live that way. Or she would as well to me. No, I can't do this. I can't live this way. And those are boundaries, but they're unspoken boundaries because they're absurd and we don't talk about all of them. So why not have the same context of saying, wait a minute, you may want to go do this and that's your choice. But if you choose that, I'm not going to participate in this. And sometimes it's, I can't be with you. And sometimes it's just, I'm not going there. If you want to go on that trip, you can go by yourself. I'm not coming along. But there's this weird kind of context of you love me, therefore you have to tolerate my bad behavior.
I think that is a lot of the places that we can tend to find ourselves. We think that is loving, is tolerating, but we're enabling at the same time that we think we're loving.
Because the opposite is also true. If you love me, you won't do that bad behavior. If you know that's a tender spot for me, then why would you engage it? Why would you intentionally want to hurt me? So many people think marriage is only a plus. Marriage means I get everything I have in my life and you. And I'm like, no, I don't know any good marriage that's like that. Marriage means I'm going to set aside what I want, right?
Yes.
So my office right now is in my bedroom because my father-in-law lives with us. It's not what I want. If I were king of the forest, I'd be like, no, I don't like this. But I love my wife and I know my wife loves her dad. So therefore, because of circumstances and reality and what's going on in her family's life, I'm making that accommodation. Now, is it easy? No. Some days I'm prickly about it, but I'm choosing to say, hey, this is what I'm giving because it's the right thing to do at this right moment in time. But that's the cool thing. Then it becomes, oh, I have a choice whether or not to accept this bad behavior or not. What it is we give up ourselves too easily. Over the years when I was a pastor, I had a lot of young women come see me for counseling, and they'd tell these stories about, I caught my husband cheating. One case, I remember her husband got his paycheck and went straight to the casino and wasted it all instead of buying baby food and diapers.
Mm.
And she comes to see me and dumps this story. And I'm like, so what are we going to do? Why are you still with him right now? Right. And then the tears come because I love him. I'm like, great. Love him, but don't accept this behavior. We just give too much value to words, not actions.
That is a fantastic point, too, that we run into with prickly people is they can say one thing and then turn around and do another. They don't follow through with the words they're saying. I love you. Well, I love you has an action and not just words.
Yeah. I've seen couples fight. I said this yesterday to a couple. Why is it we can say something to the person we say we love more than anybody else in the world? Right? So why can we say something ugly to them that we wouldn't say to the clerk at the fast food restaurant?
That's true.
Right? I mean, we just would not say that to them, regardless of how bad a job they did. Right. We wouldn't say that horrible, hateful thing to them that we just said to the person we say we love more than any person in the world. And once you recognize that, you realize, wow, I have control over that. If I can not do it to the clerk, At the store, I cannot say it to my spouse.
True.
And so again, part of that prickly pear thing is saying, hey, you're a prickly pear, and I'm not going to take that anymore. I almost walked into a porcupine once. I was backpacking and I went for a little sunset hike around our campsite, just up the trail a little bit. And thankfully, I kind of had the sense to look down, and I literally, one more step and my right leg would have been to the back end of a porcupine.
Oh, no.
And that would have hurt a lot. And I'm 10 miles up the trail, and it would have been a mess to pull those out, right? So yeah, once you've been porcupined by somebody, why do you keep stepping back into the quills? Instead, I backed away real fast. I'm like, yeah, I want to hike up this trail, but right now, if I walk up this trail, it's going to hurt. So I'm not going to do it. And sometimes you have to realize that, okay, today you're a cactus. I can't talk to you today. When you're not a cactus, let's talk.
I love the empowerment that you're giving us to equip us as we encounter those people, that it's not all about them. I love what you said too. I don't let people just focus on what the other people are doing. What is your ownership in that? And we do have some ownership in how we choose to love them or what boundaries that we set up.
Yeah. So the curveball of that, right, then turns into victimhood, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a victim basically is admitting, I don't have power here. Somebody else does. Over the years as a pastor, I've counseled some rape victims. I've literally sat in the emergency room with them as they waited to get tested, get a crime scene kit done on them, right? It's horrific. I don't recommend that to anybody, but I've done it, right? But does it make any sense for that person the rest of their life to continue to be a victim of that person from that moment? This person needs to be punished, and I'm all for that. But at some point, you have to say, hey, I've been a victim to you long enough. I'm going to overcome this and be better than you were.
Mm.
So who makes the best rape crisis counselor? Someone who's been there.
Right.
And done it, right? And went, hey, you can get through this. You can become, whole again. You can regain your life after this. And then, you multiply that by every single issue that we face. Victimhood means we've let it control us instead of saying, you know what, that is who I am. That is part of my experience, but I'm going to overcome that this way. Again, it becomes a scar that we wear, but it makes us stronger.
That is such a good point. It's out of those scars that we can help other people and show them, hey, I've been there. That's a huge part of our community, is women coming alongside other women. And even if they're 2 weeks ahead or 20 years ahead, just to be able to say, I understand what you're experiencing. I'm not experiencing the exact same way you are, but I understand that, and I'm here for you. One of the things that we encounter a lot, and you touched on this a little bit ago, was the echoes of our childhood. And the echoes of our childhood, so many times, we let that control us as adults, which changes how we see other people, how we see our own empowerment, if you will, in those circumstances, as you were describing. What are your thoughts on that, on those echoes of our childhood? How do we overcome that to help us to take that empowerment stance that you're describing? And we realize it's about what we can do in circumstances, not what other people are doing or have done to us.
So here's the cool thing about that, right, is if you've got a lot of money and a lot of time, you can go do a lot of psychotherapy and dig into that and discover all the details, right? And for some people, that becomes necessary. I'm certainly not against that. Like I said, it's very time consuming and can be really expensive. But guess what? There's a better way to overcome that. And that is forgiveness. Mm-hmm. And first of all, plugging into the source of forgiveness, that God has created that already for us, that we can, through Jesus, accept his forgiveness of us and empowerment of us. And then therefore, then we can go forgive the people that hurt us intentionally and unintentionally, and say, that's something I've let go of and been able to let go of because I know I'm forgiven. Therefore, I'm willing to forgive them for that. And it doesn't mean forgetting it. And it doesn't mean not holding them accountable. I want to make that really clear. That's not what that means. But it means simply that I can wake up each day, and when that thought begins to overwhelm me, that pain point or that trauma overwhelms me, I can say, you know what? I'm forgiven of that. I'm forgiven of this feeling that I'm having. Therefore, I can let it go and realize that I can let God hold that in his hand today. I don't have to. And that's the power. One of the few words I have the definition to is bitterness. Bitterness is like drinking poison and expecting someone else to die.
Yes.
And so if I'm still being held captive by that bitterness, then that's, to me, the quintessential example of continuing victimhood is if I'm still bitter towards, and half the time the person we're bitter at could care less that they hurt
They're
us.
thinking of us a lot less than we're thinking of them. Isn't that true?
So twice in my life, I've pulled over in a car and literally wept.
Mm.
And one time was, and just so happened, God just kind of gave me access to this story in a weird kind of connecting way. There was a lady a few years ago in California that when she was in her 20s, a guy discovered her at a shop up in the mountains of California somewhere. And he recognized her in the face, and he had been a detective years earlier. And he went and did some research. And sure enough, this girl had been kidnapped when she was a young 10, 11, 12-year-old girl by this man. He had brought her up there, had kept her locked in a room. She had had 3 of his kids, I think 2 or 3 of his kids. And, psychological damage over time, she just began to function as if that's all she could be, right? And so this guy discovered her at this store in the middle of California. And next thing you know, it's national news. They're arresting this guy and his wife. And, sure enough, he's fathered kids with her. And it was a big, huge story here about 10, 15 years ago. And I was listening to the radio when this happened, and they interviewed a woman who had had a similar experience. She was a trauma expert in this field. And they interviewed her and they said, "What advice did you give to her?" And this was her advice. She said, "I told her that she shouldn't spend one more second thinking about this man because he's already taken too much of her life."
Oh, that's good.
Right? So now that's the story. And I don't know how it happened, but 6 months later, I'm driving down the road and the news comes on. And this man has been convicted, sentenced to 300-400 years in prison. He's never getting out. And it was sentencing day, and the people that he had hurt were allowed to come and speak. And they specifically said this woman's name, and they said, "She didn't show up today, but she sent a representative to read a note." And here's what it said. It was only like 4 sentences long. And literally the note said, "I'm not thinking about you today because I've already thought about you for too much of my life. You won't get another second." And that's when I pulled over weeping, because I was like, "You go, girl. You go, because you've overcome him."
Yes.
If you can overcome that in your life, we can overcome anything.
Anything.
I mean, this man literally stole this woman's life from her. And yet she said, "I'm no longer going to give you my thoughts." Realize your thoughts have value. Yeah. You can't exchange it for money, but time is more important to me than any other resource, because it's the only thing that's truly limited in my life. I can't make more of it.
Yes. And what we focus on in our thoughts, we empower in our lives and our thoughts. It feels like those things multiply. We focus on positive things, those positive thoughts multiply, right? We focus on what's been done to us or those prickly people in our lives, those thoughts multiply, and we can find ourselves really dwelling on that.
Right. And here's the important thing. I will never let anybody feel guilty if they can't let go of some of those thoughts. That's real important. We should try and do everything we can to overcome them, but it's okay if you can't, because sometimes we just can't. Yeah. But boy, everything that we can let go of sets us free in so many other areas. We're no longer looking at the prickly pear. We're looking at the trail ahead and the vast expanse that we have in the rest of our life to live in spite of that.
Amen. Amen. Mike, thank you so much today for sharing your wisdom. And how can people find you as they think, wow, he said some powerful things that I need to implement in my life? How can people find you?
So I do counseling in Arizona through an agency called New Life Counseling. And then I do online coaching. The best way to contact me right now is through Facebook. Dr. Mike Hattabaugh. So DrMikeHattabaugh is my name on Facebook. I've got a website, but it's a little wonky right now. So we'll send you to Facebook. You can connect to me there. You can send me a message through my Facebook page and we can connect. A lot of resources there. If you go back in the history on that page of resources that I have some courses available and whatnot. But the biggest thing is just, I like to encourage people. So anytime I can do that, that's a blessing to me.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for all of your encouragement today. And I know I'm walking away going, oh yeah, there's some things that you just forget in day-to-day life that it's like, oh yeah, I can do that. I can choose differently. So we really appreciate that. And I know that our listeners will as well. So we'll definitely be sure to put in the show notes how to contact you on Facebook. And I hope people reach out and take more of your wisdom and knowledge through coaching or counseling as well.
I appreciate what you guys are doing, and blessing to your organization and all the great work you're doing helping people.
Thank you so much, Mike.
Thanks for listening. I pray you found hope in today's conversation and maybe even feel a little less alone in your story. Stay connected with us on Facebook and Instagram at Reclaimed Story. Want to learn more about living a reclaimed life and how you can be a part of our growing community of reclaimers? Check out our website at reclaimedstory.com. All of those links and more will be in the show notes. And if you enjoyed this inspirational podcast, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. That is a huge help in helping us reach more people to live the reclaimed life. Thank you so much for listening.